Hello and welcome to A Tippling Philosopher with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Frontline update for the 29th of November 2022. Sorry that my voice is a bit croaky. I am not very well at the moment. In fact, I was sort of feverishly waking up and falling asleep all through last night. Every time I woke up, I had like Bakhmut and a map of Bakhmut in my head. And I was, you're obsessed when you're having sort of fever dreams about Ukraine. Okay, so a lot potentially to go on this week. There's a lot of talk about the Russians kicking off another saturation sort of rocket missile attack. I'll talk about that in a second. Let's get on to the numbers that Ukraine have announced. But remember, Russians don't really announce numbers for the Ukraine deaths, and Ukraine don't announce them for PR reasons. So this does seem like it's one-sided when I report this, but that's just the way it is. 480 Russians soldiers dying, 3 tanks, 5 APCs, 2 artillery systems, 2 aircraft, 7 other vehicles and fuel tanks. No drones again. Some people are saying that this could be because the weather has been pretty bad and there's not a lot of drone activity when the weather is bad. There's still a lot of drones up there. There's a lot of drone footage coming out. And in fact, both sides absolutely need drones. So even when it's grey and cloudy, they're still going to be operating drones. So it's just a surprise that there aren't many down. But there also don't seem to be any Shahed 136s being used, so on and so forth. So how do the Ukrainians, for example, concoct these numbers? Well, not concoct, that's possibly a loaded term, but how do they calculate these numbers? Well, here's a nice little video. We're often asked how we tally up thousands of downed enemy vehicles. We liberate our territory and then we count just like that. This is I won't show you the whole video here, but this is quite an amazing bit of footage where this guy I don't know where this is, could be in Kherson, just walking around counting the vehicles that have been found, and they're all sort of damaged vehicles being taken out. And in the end, just in this one area, he just can't believe it. A third one, fourth, and it keeps going on. And it goes through 12th, and then he thinks he's at the end, and he's like, oh, there's more. And in the end, there's probably about 20 vehicles all in this one area. All different types of vehicles, APCs, even mines, APCs, IFVs, tanks, I think the whole lot. And it's quite incredible to think 20 vehicles, what's the replacement value of those? How much is that affecting the capacity and the capability of the Russian armed forces, particularly in that area? It's just a huge loss. It goes on and on and on. It's like, that's how we count these numbers. We literally liberate an area and count what we find. So I just thought that's an interesting video there. UK Ministry of Defence talking about something that I mentioned the other day. So this is quite interesting. Nice little link to the sort of stuff I talk about, that the Russians have stopped deploying BTGs, battalion tactical groups, these large sort of basically self-contained small army or corps of vehicles of all different types. You've got your infantry fighting vehicles, your tanks, your artillery, your supply trucks, so on and so forth. And I was talking about how I hadn't heard the term BTG being used for a couple of months, and it seems like they're starting to use companies and reduce their sort of movements down to much smaller units of troops and army. And indeed, the UK Ministry of Defence is basically saying this. Over the last 3 months, Russian forces in Ukraine have largely stopped deploying as battalion tactical groups, BTGs. The BTG concept has played a major part in Russian military doctrine for the last 10 years and saw battalion integrated with a full range of supporting subunits, including armour, reconnaissance, and, in departure from usual Western practice, artillery. Several intrinsic weaknesses of the BTG concept have been exposed in the high-intensity, large-scale combat of the Ukraine war so far. BTG's relatively small allocation of combat infantry has often proved insufficient. Decentralized distribution of artillery has not allowed Russia to fully leverage its advantage in numbers of guns, and few BTG commanders have been empowered to flexibly exploit opportunities in the way the BTG model was designed to promote. This can be seen up against how, say, the Wagner PMC is working. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the Bakhmut area, where it is very much an infantry-led sort of a project with they don't use any armor. They don't really use any mechanized equipment. They use things like mortars and artillery, but a lot of drone usage to direct where their troops should go, but no mechanized equipment. So very much not like the BTG and a smaller kind of company level activity that you see with that. Talking about the upcoming potential Russian bombardment, what this is coming from an essay from Saplienko about the possibility of Russian missile strike on the Telegram channel. What the Russians are preparing for. Information comes from various sources, including from the occupied territory. About 24 strategic bombers are now concentrated at Engels 2 airbase. That's compared to 11 that are normally there during these sort of attacks. The suspensions of some Tu-95Ms are already equipped with missiles. The Russians also equipped the Tu-160. Missiles are delivered to Sevastopol Bay. In the south, the Russians are pulling up S-300. Those are surface-to-air missiles that can be used in the secondary mode for ground attacks. Several installations have been spotted in the Zaporizhia region. A large number of Iskanders, these are cruise missiles on MLRS, are concentrated north of Belarus. There is a possibility that this time the Russians will be able to pressure Lukashenko, and he will give permission to use a Belarusian Polonaise MLRS. It's impossible to say whether all the arsenal will be used, just as it is impossible to say when it will be applied, but the probability is very high. You've also got ships in the Black Sea and submarines in the Black Sea. If they use it, they can hit Ukrainian targets for several days in a row in several waves, so that each subsequent one does not give Ukraine time to restore what was destroyed by the previous one. So I've had some people on my thread say the reason why they're waiting a week to let off these successive attacks is to give the Ukrainians a chance to rebuild and then hit it after they rebuilt. I would utterly disagree with that. The reason they're not doing attacks on consecutive days is because they don't have the capacity to do so. They don't have the capability to do so. They literally don't have the missiles. And I think they're having to get them in from all different places. And when they get them in, they use them. If they'd done it on consecutive days, they would have fundamentally crippled Ukraine. The energy system would have been completely taken out. And I think it's if they could, they would sort of mentality here. So I disagree that they are purposefully waiting a week or so between these saturation rocket and missile attacks. Enemies are also guaranteed to look for our air defense systems. The guys from the Air Force who are currently on combat duty are Ukraine's main hope. Therefore, a big request to adequate people not to film or show the operation of air defense systems, and the security service will come to the inadequate ones. So basically saying keep operational security top priority. There has been this news that loads of these 15 Tor M2 surface-to-air missiles have been sent to Belarus, and the question is why? Is that part of this missile attack? Can they be used in a secondary mode? What's going on there? And they've been following a transfer of a large echelon of military equipment up into Belarus. And it's amazing that open source intelligence can follow these things, on a day-to-day basis. Another bit of news, talked previously about how important the rail network is to the Russians, and how it had been hit near the front line, near Volnovakha, near sort of Pavlivka and Vuhledar. So Volnovakha's there, so up a little bit around the corner, and Novomikhailivka. Well, actually, it's been hit further down south or to the west towards Kherson, just south of Zaporizhia on the way to Crimea, north of Melitopol. It's been hit yesterday, that railway line there. So that's important because obviously it stops. This is your primary source of logistics, or primary method of logistics to supply both Crimea, Melitopol, and Kherson from the east. Without the Kerch Bridge in Crimea working, this is your main source of supplies. So surely this is going to be target number one for the Ukrainians, and it's well within range, both up here and also down here. This is within HIMARS range here. So that's completely unsurprising. Over the past day, a couple of Russian jets have been shot down, Su-25 and Su-24. Not sure exactly where, but that has been announced in quite a few places. And the Russians are saying that the Ukrainians are carrying out mobilization measures in the region cities. So this in Kharkiv and Vovchansk, in this kind of northern area here. They are claiming that the Ukrainians, this is Rubar, that they are carrying out mobilization as well as bringing personnel and vehicles to these areas, so reinforcing. There have been claims from the Russians that the Ukrainians are getting ready for an offensive up into Russia. And of course, that's absolute nonsense. The Ukrainians would never do that. They don't have the capability to do that. They're concentrating on these front lines. But I think what this does is it gives the Russians permission to build defenses up here and to start amassing a load of troops, as if to say, we're only amassing troops here to defend ourselves from the Ukrainians. Of course, they're not. They've got something else in mind, and possibly they're going to hit down south from up north here. But that's just speculation on my part. Okay, let's go to the front lines, and we're going to go to the northeast, which is this Kupiansk down to Svatove to Kreminna region. Absolutely no change of territory in any meaningful way. What you're really seeing is the Russians attacking. Oops, sorry. Let's start that one again. The other way. That be the Ukrainians. Russians attacking towards Stanomivka. And you have up in Kuzumivka trying to get Novoselivsk just to the west of there, as I showed you before. And I think towards Makivka there's claims, and Nevsky as well. But as ever, when one side attacks in one place, the other side attacks in another. So you get the Ukrainians attacking around Ploshchanka apparently. And in other places as well. I think they're also trying to do counterattacks up here in the Kuzumivka area. So that's really toughly contested. And then as you come down, apparently in Dobrova, the Ukrainians are pushing hard there. But then down south in the sort of Belarus area, and perhaps even in the forest just north of there, the Russians are pushing back. So there are just attacks and counterattacks all over the shop. The end result is that there isn't a lot of movement, but a lot of artillery duels and consistent fighting all up and down this front. And really that's the case until we get down to Bakhmut. And there's been a lot of talk about Bakhmut over the last couple of days, because there has been some territory being gained by the Russians, and I've been not all necessarily doom and gloom, but it's not looking great for the Ukrainians. However, there is a lot to say here, and there's a lot of qualification to be had. The first thing to say revolves around this place, Spirne, just north of Bakhmut. If we come north of Yakovlivka, Bilarivka, Berestove, there's Spirne here, which has been on the front for some time. It's been fighting around there, but the Russians claimed yesterday to have captured it. This becomes mainly from this video, but it's just some guy inside a closed building without the possibility of recognizing the environment, and it doesn't really confirm anything. So waiting for better information. Some people are now calling that claim BS, that they don't hold Spirne. So I guess we'll have to wait to see whether anything does come from there in terms of news. And down to Bakhmut, there are some claims about Soledar, that the Ukrainians in Soledar. So the Russians are in Soledar. So again, we wait to hear news about that. There's obviously pressure on all of these places. War mapper here, just showing that Bakhmut is under huge amounts of pressure from the south and the north. Let's look at some of the claims. Null report says Russian sources claim they captured Odradivka, Ozaryanivka, Kudyumivka, Zenonopilia, and Spirne. Until now, no visual confirmation whatsoever contested. For now, we can confirm that the Spirne claim is BS. That's the one I was just talking about. Fighting is ongoing along the whole front line. I told you yesterday that I have changed my map slightly, and I'll show you that in a second in more detail. Defmon says that Ukrainian reported repulse attacks around Yakovlivka, Soledar, Bakhmut, and Avdivka. We'll get on to Avdivka. Oh, no, Avdivka is a small place I'll show you in a second. Russian propagandists claim that they were inside Soledar, but according to the information I'm getting, this is false. So again, sometimes it's just you have to wait a couple of days to be sure. So I'm actually going to extract my Bakhmut piece from this video because it made it too long. So I'll do a separate Bakhmut analysis as a separate video. But the TLDR of it, the long and short of it is that Bakhmut should hold. It is really solid defensively. As a town itself, the Russians won't want to do a full frontal assault, and even these areas that are the Ukrainians have lost to the Russians over the last couple of days. So Ozaryanivka, Khodymyivka might be lost today or over the next few days, and there's a small settlement Avdivka here. Even though these and Zelenopilya just there, even though these have been lost, there are fortifications around here. There's a canal that goes up here that they'll have to negotiate. And there are huge amounts of trench networks just behind Klishchivka, which is on behind Klishchivka is elevated here. So it will be really difficult for the Russians to continue their encirclement without a massive amount of attrition. And what they are doing at Bakhmut, the PMC, the Wagner PMC, is swapping lives, convicts and mobilized lives that they see as fairly valueless for attritional value. They're swapping them for Ukrainian lives, and they don't mind piling in more and more people to take Ukrainian lives eventually and gain meters. So it's that's the calculation they're willing to make and take. So that's the way they're doing things. But I analyze that in a lot more detail in a separate Bakhmut piece that I'll extract out of what I've already recorded. Okay, let's go on down to Avdivka and Donetsk, just to the west of Donetsk. So literally as we speak, there's footage coming out, well, it's from 28 minutes ago, of Russian air forces attacking Avdivka. So, they are using combined arms around here. But essentially, the Ukrainians have repelled attacks in Vodyane, Pervomaysky, down in Novelsky, just down here. And so it's same as it usually is, just really intense fighting, apparently, right around Avdivka. And also down to Marinka. So Marinka is a site of heavy fighting at the moment, with Russian air being used around there. So as Noel report says, fighting is inside Marinka. The town is considered a grey zone now. Ukrainians still have a dominant presence, and there you go. So it is not pleasant in there. But the same as it has been for the last sort of few days, like I've been reporting to you. So lots of heavy fighting, just Ukrainians repelling apparently lots of attacks. The Russians have reported that somewhere around Vuhledar, the Ukrainians have done a counterattack. I don't know whether that's towards Pavlivka, more likely Mikhailsky. There seems to be counterattacks towards that direction. There's fighting up in Novomykhailivka as well. And so, just the usual stuff around here. In fact, Institute for the Study of War, they say Russian sources claim that Ukrainian troops attempted limited counterattack southwest of Donetsk city in the Vuhledar area. Russian forces continued routine strikes along the line of contact in the Avdivka Donetsk city area, western Donetsk Oblast, and eastern Zaporizhia Oblast. So, heavy fighting, repelled attacks, pretty much par for the course around there. Okay, let's move on to the Kherson area. So as we come down on a war map, it might be quite useful to just well, first of all, Dnipro has been hit overnight. That has been the scene of some rocket attacks. Also, Nikopol and Mayonets, are just is almost again par for the course on a daily basis. They're getting hit, but Ukraine have been hitting a lot of targets. Makei here. Around the Melitopol area and Zaporizhia Oblast, as well as sites down in the Kherson Oblast. So we'll have a look at just a quick roundup of some of those that have happened over the last sort of 3 or 4 days. On November the 25th, they in Melitopol, Polohoy, Mikhailivka, which is just north of Melitopol, in the Zaporizhia Oblast, they've hit Russian targets and wounded over 100 military personnel and destroyed 10 pieces of military equipment and 2 ammunition depots. The Ukrainians reported on the 28th that strikes against Russian forces in Polohoy and Chernihivka, south of Polohoy, Zaporizhia Oblast, injured 80 military personnel, and that Russian and Ukrainian sources reported that Ukrainian forces shelled along Russian logistics lines in Kherson Oblast on the east or the left bank of the Dnipro, including Veliki Kopani, Holopristan, and Radensk. On the 27th to 28th, the Ukrainian General Staff claimed that they damaged 30 pieces of Russian military equipment in Holopristan alone. So that is pretty devastating for the Russians. That will be, but the Russians are hitting back as well. Just to finish, the Ukrainian Odessa Oblast military administration stated that the Ukrainian strikes destroyed Russian military warehouses and a command post in unspecified areas of Skadovsk and Kherson rayons. So just to let you know that Skadovsk, which is down there, I'll show you on the war mapper map. Skadovsk is there, so it hits there. Holopristan here, and along this line, they're just lots of hits. But the Russians are hammering Kherson city. There's people are evacuating generally out of Kherson, which is so sad, having just liberated the city. Now those liberated personnel, liberated civilians are having to get themselves out. It's just pretty difficult down there. Noel says no map changes. AFU, so the Ukrainian operations on the Kimban Spit continue, said Natalia Humenyuk, head of the Joint Coordination Press Center, the AFU South. The AFU, so the Ukrainians hit Chaplinka Airport with GMRLS, and Kherson once again shelled by Russia. So the Chaplinka air base is there, and that seems to be the place that keeps getting hit. But the Russians are moving stuff out there and into Crimea. Zelensky said last night that Russia has attacked Kherson Oblast 258 times over the past week. He said in his evening address that they fired 258 times at 30 settlements in Kherson Oblast. So it is, both sides are hammering away at each other. Okay, this is well worth looking at. I think Reporting Ukraine did a video just solely on this, which are the defenses. I've talked a lot about the defense lines being built up around Kherson, and they're generally built up around GLOCs, around ground lines of communication, so roads and places like that. Kimban Spit is interesting. So they've built heavy defenses around, blocking of the Spit. So if Ukrainian forces, do manage to take the whole peninsula, then they will struggle to get out of there unless they can sort of maneuver themselves around in a different place. So perhaps, coming across there, but that's difficult. That's difficult to get down there. Water, lakes, this is really difficult terrain. It's not easy. A lot of sand, a lot of marsh, lakes, those kind of things. A full assault will be difficult against that. But then, could there be amphibious landings that circumvent the whole of the peninsula and land here? And even if they get a few special forces around, they can cause havoc behind these defensive lines. So the defensive lines are only as good as their weakest points, right? So unless the Russians have really good defensive lines that go right across this entire region, maybe in, a couple of lines, unless they've got that, if it's somehow sort of broken, then they're going to be in trouble. Oops, what they've done, I've got rid of that. Now, if they've got broken lines of defense, then and obviously the Ukrainians will have to cope with terrain and whatnot. But if you can flank any of these defenses anyway, or break through particularly weak areas of them, then things become easy. You're behind the lines, and those defenses are rendered, useless. So their defenses, I think, are only as good as their weakest points. And if they have many breaks and many weak points, then that doesn't bode well for them. Is this just about slowing them down, such that it gives the Russians a chance to make sure Crimea is properly defended against? I don't know. But certainly these defenses look like they are around particularly important sort of junctions, road junctions, and they're defending against attacks along the road rather than just out in the middle of the agricultural land and whatnot. Anyway, that I think is interesting. We'll see how much more built up Kherson becomes, and whether these over time are going to be easy to overcome as defenses. So there you go. I hope that's of some use to you. I'm sorry, I'm quite ill at the moment, and my brain doesn't work when I'm ill, but also makes my multiple sclerosis worse, which affects my brain anyway, and my cognitive load and my ability to speak and get words out. And I get my words confused. So I know sometimes I say Russia instead of Ukraine, or say this word I say bomb instead of missile. That happens, and I do apologize. Just my brain is not as sharp as it used to be. Massive apologies for that. Anyway, please like, subscribe, and share. I will be putting my extra video on my other channel today, trying to alternate. By the end of the week, all my extras will be on that channel. That's ATPGeo, youtube.com/ATPGeo. Please hop over there, like, subscribe, and share those as well. And thank you for being with me. We will see. I've already heard literally now on the socials, it's coming out that the bombers have left the Engels airfield. So whether they are on a training mission, or whether actually you might see the start of this much talked about Russian missile and rocket attack today, I don't know. Who knows? But things could be happening as we speak. There are lots of air raid. People are on edge, in terms of air raids and their defense systems, and their air defense systems going off in the Belgorod region. So, lots is happening literally right now. By the time this video gets out, it may have already started, or it might not be happening, or it might be happening tomorrow or later this week. We shall see. Anyway, thanks so much. Take care.